So, in this short video, I want to talk about the Dragon Sovereigns of Teyvat. What we know about them, what we don't know about them, and also the lore surrounding the ancient dragons in general. I know that everyone is talking about Skirk right now, but please bear with me. Once she finally comes out, if she has some juicy lore, I will be making a video about it as well. But right now, I want to make a video that summarizes the Dragon Sovereign lore, so this is it. Well, the Dragon Sovereigns correspond to the 7 elements of Teyvat, and their authority is currently being held by the 7 Archons, well except Neuvillette of course. They were led by the Dragon King Nibelung, who is also said to have been born alongside Teyvat in the distant past. It's unclear if the Dragon King Nibelung is actually one of the sovereigns, but he probably isn't. The Dragon Sovereigns were the original rulers of the era of the Old War, as it's called in Teyvat, but eventually they were defeated by the Primordial One, and most of their authority was stripped away from them. First of all, it's quite hard to say what exactly qualifies as a Dragon Sovereign. Genshin lore is often likened by many people to archaeology, because people are trying to put bits and pieces found all around the world to create the whole picture, and this means that there are things that everyone agrees on, and some things that are understood differently by different people. And the Dragon Sovereign's identities is one of these things. We know that Neuvillette is the Hydra Dragon Sovereign, Apep is the Dendro Dragon Sovereign, and Xiuhcoatl was the Pyro Dragon Sovereign, but he is no longer alive, and he isn't very likely to be ever revived. But then the debate about who is a Dragon Sovereign and who isn't starts. First, there is Xiuhcoatl, who is, I think, mostly agreed by the community to be one of the 7 sovereigns, but it's also not as clear. Although some people who are part of the Xian community say that it's very clear that he is one of the sovereigns and that this information is just lost in translation, but I can neither confirm nor deny this. Apparently, in Chinese he is called a Dragon King, which is the title that's sometimes used for the other sovereigns as well. Anyway, he's described as extremely old, even older than the mountains. He's also an elemental dragon, which all fits this description. So for the sake of not speculating very much in this video, I won't go into much detail about Xiuhcoatl, since his status as a sovereign isn't completely clear. Then there is Dvalin, who is also theorized to be one of the sovereigns, and lately, since there has been more information about the Marejivari, and some people think it's connected to the Anmo sovereign, the talks about Dvalin's status have been more frequent. There is some evidence as to why he could be the Dragon Sovereign of Wind, which is for example that he is also an elemental being, same as other Dragon Sovereigns, or that Nahida and the Traveler liken Dvalin to other sovereigns in some dialogue. But it could also be the case that both Xiuhcoatl and Dvalin are more akin to Scylla, who was described as a Dragon Prince in the past, and he is also straight up called a dragon by many sources, the same way the Dragon Sovereigns are. So maybe these two are a similar case. But I think that mostly, when the game describes the Dragon Sovereigns and Dvalin and Xiuhcoatl, it refers to them as dragons and not really much by other names, except some very rare cases. Like how Saurians are described both as dragons and as Saurians, and are in fact devolved dragons, or how Bishops are mostly called Bishops instead, and this includes Scylla as well. So to me it seems like both Dvalin and Xiuhcoatl are highly likely to be Dragon Sovereigns, although Xiuhcoatl seems more likely to be one than Dvalin to me. Then there is also the identity of the Electro Sovereign, who we know nothing about, and the Cryo Sovereign, who will most likely be revealed sometime during the Snažná patches. But the fact that we know nothing about the Electro Sovereign made a lot of people speculate as to why that is. It could be that they were simply slain a long time ago, and they were forgotten by today's Inazuma. It could also be that they were connected to some other region or sub-region that we haven't explored yet, like Marejivari for example. Some theories go much further and for example speculate that we already know them, and that they could be someone like Kapatsir, or some other powerful entity connected to Inazuma. One theory also suggests that Nibelung may in fact be the Electro Sovereign, since we don't know entirely for sure if he counts as a sovereign and if he had a specific element that he ruled over. But with all of this out of the way, we can finally focus on the confirmed elemental sovereigns. So I'll start with Neuvillette. Well, he's probably the one we know the most about, since he is a playable character, but also it's true that he himself doesn't know much about why he was born in his human form, because there was once other Hydra Dragon Sovereign before him that perished long time ago. And then, according to the prophecy we learned about in Enkanomiya, a new Hydra Dragon was supposed to be born, walking with a cane, and that's exactly what happened. Originally, as all the other Dragon Sovereigns, even Neuvillette didn't have his full authority and served only as the Iudex for 500 years, because he was invited to the court of Fontaine by Fausalon. At some point, he led the Melusines to the court of Fontaine from the Merusi village, and some people therefore thought that he might in fact be related to the Melusines. But we know that isn't the case. After the events of the Fontaine Archon quest, he finally gained his full dragonhood and his full authority as the Hydra Dragon Sovereign, which allowed him to get the people of Fontaine real blood and avoid the prophecy. Also, he's now the one who puts aside pieces of his power for the visions instead of the Archon, since Hydra Archon's divine throne no longer exists. Apep is the Dendro Dragon Sovereign, who is actually the original Sovereign, unlike Neuvillette, and was heavily corroded by the Forbidden Knowledge until Nahida and the Traveler cleansed it in the story quest. A long time ago, when King Deshret still ruled over the deserts of Sumeru, they made a deal that once he dies, Apep will devour him and gain all his knowledge. But Deshret deliberately used this deal in order to corrupt the Dendro Dragon by Forbidden Knowledge, in the end, as his final plan. And in the present, as I said, Nahida and the Traveler healed it, so it's finally cleansed of the Forbidden Knowledge. It originally ruled over Sumeru before the Heavenly Principles usurped Teyvat from the dragons and fought alongside the Dragon King Nibelung during the War of Vengeance. In terms of its appearance, it's interesting that it looks more serpent-like compared to the typical image of a dragon, but that's about it, if I don't want to go into too much unimportant detail. Xiuhcoatl was the Pyro Dragon Sovereign who ruled over all of Natlan in the past and also had the power to control the Primal Flame. He was born from the Primal Flame in the Great Volcano of Tolan, and he used this power to give life to the rest of the dragons in Natlan, which is also how Natlan became the nation of dragons in the end. The first one was Xiuhcoatl Khan, or the Sage of the Stolen Flame, who became his younger brother this way. He is the one who created the city of Tolan inside the volcano. After the appearance of the Heavenly Principles, he was frozen to death and fell into the state of false death in the depths of the abyss, so you could say that he faked his own death. After Nibelung returned during the War of Vengeance, Xiuhcoatl awakened and defeated the envoys dispatched by the Heavenly Principles, and eventually he regained control over Natlan. But he felt that the abyss is still corroding him, and that his moments of clarity grew shorter. He then created the Xiuhcoatl, which is a device that can eradicate the entirety of the abyss from Teyvat, but at the price of also turning everything to phlogiston. A long time after this, Xabalanque fought him in the volcano and eventually defeated him. Xiuhcoatl was so powerful that he was basically undefeatable at this point in time, but since he created the Xiuhcoatl to eradicate the abyss, he had to control it with his eye, and Xabalanque used this weakness to defeat him. In truth, both Xabalanque and Xiuhcoatl died in that moment, but Xabalanque then emerged from the flames once again and became the first Pyro Archon, which implies that there maybe was some kind of deal with the ruler of death at play, even at this point in time. And there's also a small easter egg, or whatever you want to call it, when he fights us as an abyssal mimic created by Xiuhcoatl. There is a short scene where he looks at the camera and sad music plays for a bit, probably because he's forced to fight for the abyss, which he hated his entire life. Then, since I already talked about Xiuhcoatl and the Xiuhcoatl, there is surprisingly the little one, aka the Traveler's companion in Natlan, who bears the mark of the Flame Lord. And it's complicated, but the fact that he has the Flame Lord's blessing essentially means that he could become a new Pyro Dragon Sovereign through activating the Xiuhcoatl. But as we all know, in the final chapter of the main Natlan War quest, he decided to not activate it, and in the end chose to return to the Traveler and Pylon instead. And lastly, there is the Dragon King Nibelung, who, as I already mentioned, could count as one of the Sovereigns, but we can't really be sure. So I already talked quite a bit about him in this video, but to summarize the important stuff about this guy, he was the ruler of Teyvat before the arrival of the first Descender. In fact, according to the finale of the Deep Galleries artifact set, he was born together with Teyvat and promised to take his people, meaning the ancient dragons, toward the stars, since this world was destined to be destroyed in the end. Nibelung is described as a huge dragon that has bright shining scales that were eventually corrupted to be dark by the abyss. In the distant past, he met with the legendary Voyager, who told him about this world's fate, and they promised each other to meet after some time, but that never happened. Once the Heavenly Principles invaded Teyvat, he was eventually forced to flee and return after some time, together with the Forbidden Knowledge. He and the other ancient dragons believed that this new power would lead them to victory, but they eventually lost this war of vengeance, although they deeply wounded the Heavenly Principles in the process, leaving their functions ruined. It's suspected that this is at least partially the reason why the Heavenly Principles are still asleep. But because he was defeated, the Heavenly Principles earned the right to shape this world to their will, and cast down the Celestial Nails to recreate the so-called Holy Land, rich with phlogiston, into the Teyvat we see today. This, together with the ability of the dragons to quickly evolve and adapt to their environment, led to their devolution into their current forms. And that's basically it. I hope that everything I said made sense, and this video will provide some good summary on the whole Dragon Sovereign topic that's becoming more and more relevant as time goes on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you maybe even learned something new. But with that out of the way, take care and I'll see you in the next one.